All right. Welcome, everybody, to this month's WrenchWay Roundtable. Really excited to have everybody join us for, I think, what something is that is really, really important, celebrating women in wrenching. And we're going to talk about a lot of things today. So, really excited. I was just telling our team here in the office that it felt like it had been a long time since we've had a roundtable, even though it's only been a month. But it felt like a long delay. So it's nice to get back in front of everybody and hopefully have some really good conversation. I'm going to start off with some housekeeping like we typically do. Of course, we're celebrating women in wrenching, have a great set of panelists this month. We're a person down without Morgan Patterson. I know she's a high school instructor and was struggling to find a sub at the last minute there. So we'll work around that and really try to still deliver some really good content here. Just so you know, we've muted your microphones and I can see everybody's already we're getting everybody in the habit of introducing themselves in the webinar chats at the open, which is really cool to see. It's neat to see where everybody's coming from and joining us through Zoom from. So please continue the conversation. We love to see the chat just go wild during these. I think it's always a lot of fun. And just so you know, we do record these roundtables. So if you registered for the roundtable, or you want to rewatch the roundtable after we get done with it, you can go out and you can actually view the recording them. All right, next slide here. Again, all sessions are being recorded. If you want to talk with the other attendees, make sure you use the chat functionality. Sometimes we get that confused with the Q&A. When we are presenting and when we're talking, oftentimes it can get lost in the chat if you put a question in the chat. So if you can actually go ahead and use the Q&A to put your question, that helps us out a lot. And really, the chat, again, is a great place to put best practices, to talk about ways that we can improve the industry. I think there's going to be a lot of maybe opinions about this subject, and I think that's a good thing, right? We can get it out there and talk about some pretty important things. Lastly, just a quick plug for WrenchWay, who we are. As you can see, our mission is to promote and improve the technician careers, and we want to improve the industry as a whole, right? That's why we're here talking about this today. We want to really drive conversation around ways that we can improve the work environment for not only technicians, but service advisors, service managers, fixed ops directors. We want to make this community a little bit of a better place to be, right? So the more we talk about it, the more we can get key issues out on the table and talk about them, I think the better. For our solutions and what we offer, we do have a variety of different things, including our Top Shops pages, School Connect. Shout out to School Connect. That's one thing that we've put a ton of effort into this year, and seeing our clients and the relationships that they're building with these schools, both at the high school and post-secondary level, has been extremely rewarding. And it's a lot of fun to see those relationships start to take place, because what we're doing is building a better foundation for our industry, getting more people into the industry. And really, that's why we're here today. So I am going to stop sharing my screen and bring on our panelists. And this is going to be a fun conversation. The reason why it's going to be a fun conversation is because, one, we're going to take a minute to celebrate the women that are in the industry, but then we're also going to talk about some of the key challenges in the industry for women, and maybe some advice we would give to young women trying to enter our industry. So joining me today, Katie Marks from Tom Wood Nissan. Good afternoon, Katie. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Coming to us from Indianapolis. We were talking before we got on this webinar about key things that I have not done in Indianapolis. Apparently, I'm just the worst traveler in the world. I've been to Indianapolis several times, but have not taken advantage of a lot of things. A lot of things for me to do down there, isn't there?
There are quite a few.
Yeah, I've got to get better at that. And then Jessica Delicious, how are you doing?
I'm great, Jay. Thank you so much for having me on. It's going to be a great conversation because you're pretty good at this. You're great at moderating these panels.
I'm great at just getting out of the way and letting the talent actually talk.
Yes.
That's a good strategy in general. And Jessica, we were just able to do a podcast together that I think launched last week or the week before, and really had a lot of fun in that conversation as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Jay. I feel kind of famous right now. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, well, let's get right into it. As we mentioned, we want to learn more about you first. Let's talk about you. We'll talk about your backgrounds once we get kind of a brief introduction. But Jessica, if you wouldn't mind leading off, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Jessica Toliuszis. I work for Highline where I lead our auto retail team. We manufacture and distribute oil, lubricants, and chemicals. And my volunteer job is that I'm the chair for Women in Auto Care. And this is, it's been a couple of years, but this will be my very last year. So I have until about February to continue being the chair. And it's been probably the biggest honor of my entire life to have been able to serve this community.
You've made one heck of an impact. And if you haven't listened to the podcast we did with Jessica, I would highly encourage doing so. A lot of great information on the very subject that we're talking about today. So really a pleasure to have her back on to share some of her experiences and maybe ways that we can get better. So thank you so much for joining us. Katie, let's hear a little bit about you in Indianapolis.
Yes. So I work for the Tom Wood Group as a large dealer. I've been here specifically at Nissan for almost 13 years.
All right.
So with the group a little bit longer than that. Right now, I am a service advisor and also the assistant supervisor for the drive. So yeah, it's been fun.
we talked a little bit before we started the webinar about taking things home and how difficult it is to not take things home. And Katie had some great, I don't even know if it's advice, just maybe a great mindset on what to do to not take it home, right? It was something that your dad had taught you.
Yes. So yeah, I was just explaining how my dad told me he did not want me to work at a car dealership, but here I am. So yeah, I just remember that. It also being young, not really hearing those things. So it's done wonders for home life. I mean, obviously you can't always leave it at work, but it's usually best. Helps.
Yeah, I was mentioning how terrible I am at that part. I don't think I have the ability to leave it at work, even though it would be extremely healthy to do so. I am jealous of those that can kind of separate church and state there a little bit. Let's talk about both of you, and I'll start with you, Jessica, and I want to learn about how you got started in this business and what drove you to get in. I think your story is going to be a little bit unique and a little bit different than what Katie's is. So I think it's fascinating because one thing that the listeners will start to understand is that maybe not everybody's coming from the same background into this business.
Yeah, sure. Well, you can listen to the podcast, I think, if you want the full history. So the shortened version is that I was recruited into this industry because they were looking for someone with a diverse point of view. I came from a very different industry. It was fashion, jewelry, home decor. I had a small consulting business, and I was recruited to come work at N.A. Williams, which is a manufacturer's rep group. And I loved that. It's a really amazing opportunity to see how organization and structure and culture are built at a ton of different companies. And I was recently recruited to come to Highline Warren to really lead strategy around our retail business. And I came into it, I think the biggest thing that drew me is when they were recruiting me, I had gone through some hard times. I had gone through 2001, I had gone through 2008. And so I remember struggling. And what they said was that the automotive industry is resilient. And in good times, it does good. And in bad times, it does really good. And that was really impactful, right? Because I want to make sure that I can provide for myself and my family. And I imagine Katie and a lot of people, Jay, like you on this call, have also felt that same way, have felt really grateful for the industry that we're in.
Yeah, absolutely. And really fascinating to see the different types of backgrounds that come into our industry. One that you probably didn't think you would be in at some point earlier in your life, and it's so great to pull talent from different areas because I think it adds so much to our industry as a whole. Now, Katie, you came from a background a little bit, right? Your dad had told you not to come into the industry, but your dad was in the industry. He was
Yeah.
somebody in the industry telling you not to come into the industry.
Yes. Well, I think it was just something he knew it was difficult, and he knew kind of how everything was at the car dealership, and he didn't want his daughter going into it. But yeah, my uncle got me started in the Tom Wood group. So he started me at our Ford store, and from there I kind of bounced around to different stores, just small jobs, and Nissan was like, "Hey, come here. We need you."
What was your first job in a dealership?
A porter shuttle driver. So I started at the bottom. Now I'm here.
little Drake reference there. Nice. So walk me through those early days at coming in as a porter. What was the spread between, how many females were you working with compared to males, and really starting off in that position, which is pretty manual, right? It's hard work.
Yeah, actually, there were quite a few women. Ford had one female advisor, and so her and I got along really well. And I moved to our Lexus store, and actually the advisor I worked with there, Shannon, she is still at Lexus as an advisor.
All right.
Mary over at Volvo, I worked over there for a while. She is still there at Volvo. So there's quite a few. There's other women too that I've worked with, but a lot that are still working for the group 13, 15 plus years later. So I had great role models.
How important was it for you to have visibility to other females working in a dealership as you were coming in?
Really good. I mean, the one thing for me is I was kind of like, oh, I don't know anything about cars. How am I going to go talk to somebody about exhaust or a catalytic converter? How am I going to do that? I don't know anything about them. But then I saw the other ladies. I mean, they're just rock stars, really. They knew their stuff, and they were just, I mean, that to me helped me say, okay, all right, they can do it, I can do it, get it done.
Jessica, it does feel like we're getting more and more females into the industry. Something we talked about on the podcast was, I think at one point it was 1% of all technicians were female. Now we're hedging up to 3%. We're working our way up, right? I kind of want to maybe have that same question to you, but phrase it a little bit differently in that when we talk about the importance of visibility to others doing something that you want to do, and we look at maybe a female working in a shop, and it could be as a service advisor, could be as a technician, how important is it to see somebody that's successful doing that and somebody that is strong and really smart doing that same thing, and something, as a female to female, you could relate to and say, hey, you know what, somebody's blazing that path or has blazed that path for me already. It's got to make it a little bit easier, doesn't it?
You have to see it to believe it, and you have to be able to believe it to achieve it. That's kind of corny, but it's really true. And I think you could see it in different ways. But I think in the dealership business, so in Katie's business, I want to say it's in the low 30% of that are women. And in the aftermarket, the part of the business that I'm in, it's in the low 20s. And it's actually been falling over the past couple of years because of COVID. So many people, if you had to be a caregiver, it was really tough to continue to go into a dealership or go into a shop or go to work, and you had to stay home to take care of somebody. And that isn't always the female, but oftentimes it does fall on the female. So you saw a lot of retraction of those numbers over the past few years. So I think it's really important to have those role models. And I think I really respect our company, right? Our company is great. We have a CIO, a COO, and our chief legal counsel are all females. So at Highline Warren, we're creating a place for that. And I think about what we're doing in Women in Auto Care. We're trying to have a stage and to build a platform for women executives from the top all the way to the bottom, and opportunities for them to shine, so that the next generation of people, so like Katie and I, can look at this industry, and the next generation can say, wow, that's something that I think I could do. That seems pretty cool.
Well, and when we talk about visibility, what you had done with Women in Auto Care, again, mentioned this in the podcast, but the amount of buzz that you generated with really smart, capable women, all at one conference, and really, all felt like all sharing their message on LinkedIn, and just being able to see that there are some incredibly talented females in this business was really rewarding. Not for me as much, but just it kind of warmed your heart to see that we're moving in the right direction as an industry.
Yeah, our industry is complicated and complex, and there are lots of different pieces and parts. And I want to say that it's intentional that we're telling people to post things on LinkedIn, but I don't think we said that once during the conference. It was just that people they felt so impassioned and empowered, and they really wanted to share it with the people in their lives.
Which is a really cool thing. I think, again, as you build that buzz, it becomes more of that cool industry to come into, that it becomes that just really that destination industry where maybe you're treated differently or better than what others have treated females in the past. It hasn't always been that way, right? And I think that's one of the things that we need to address today, is that there are challenges for coming into an industry as a female, into our industry as a female. Katie, I'm going to go back to you and talk about maybe some of those challenges and things that we've learned over the course of your career that might have been a little different than a male would go through, that maybe a man wouldn't go through those same types of things. Do you have anything in your career that you could point to that, maybe felt a little different because you were a female?
To be honest with you, I don't really have that many instances where I have felt like, oh, well, he's going to get this or he's going to get that before me. Maybe in the beginning, becoming an advisor and not really knowing anything, there may have been less opportunities for me to maybe, write up certain customers or make a certain amount of money. But I don't really ever feel like I have been in that position, really.
Love it.
I've always been treated really well here. And if I've ever been put in a situation where, I maybe wasn't so comfortable, it's always been rectified. It's been taken care of. So I would hope that when my boss gets to the position when he is retiring or leaving, that I'll get the opportunity to be in that position, which there's already been some talk about that, but I would hope that I would get that opportunity, but obviously we're not there yet.
Was there ever, you have maybe a little bit of a different insight than a lot of our guests do, in that you're a writer, you're an advisor, right? And yeah. I'm curious as to if you see any difference in the way the customers treat you versus a man.
Yes, we will have that. I mean, where we are right now, our dealership is located close to Carmel, which is a area where a lot of women do stay at home, and the guys are going off to work, and they'll bring the cars in, and I will see that they do come to the women on the drive more than they would the man, or maybe trust a woman more. But there's always been those situations where someone will call and say, oh, I've got this check engine light on and I just need to talk to somebody to help me figure it out. And our technicians don't answer the phone. Like, they don't give free advice. So, it's one of those things where, I have had to come up with a way to make them trust me and say, no, like, I know what I'm talking about. You can talk to me. And in the end, if we come to a conclusion or some kind of help, they've always been like, wow, you're so helpful. Thank you so much. Yeah, I am. So that has been something that I have encountered. So yeah.
Well, and you just nailed a key advantage there that you have as a female in the service drive, which is you have I feel like a little bit of built-in trust there already, right? Where it's female to female. There's been some not so good stories, maybe especially you talk about decades ago in our industry. There was a reason we had kind of a black eye as repair shops, right? There were some people that probably had no business talking to a customer up front, and there's still some of that, right? There's still some of that where maybe we have the wrong person up there, but I do think that is a distinct advantage when you, that very thing you just talked about, there's some inherent trust, I feel like, that maybe a male service advisor might not get.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we have 3 women on our drive out of 4 advisors. So,
wow.
Yeah, we're taking over.
I don't know if somebody in the chat knows, but I think it's in the mid 60% range of purchasing decisions in the automotive industry that are made by women. So women actually control the purse strings of this industry. And I think that speaks to what Katie's talking about, is that the women are bringing the cars in and looking for advice, and they see a familiar face and they're willing to talk to you. Jay, can I ask a question to Katie?
Please do. Please do.
Katie, it sounds like you have an amazing culture at Tom Wood. And I'm really fascinated in how you think that culture has been created, where there are women that are staying, that are coming to work there and enjoying it so much that they stay. You mentioned 4 or 5 other women that are really happy with their careers. I'm really interested in the leadership structure.
So something new that we just started, we do have an employee engagement committee. So the employee engagement committee, we meet once a month, and different people are on this committee, but we meet once a month and we just talk about what's it gonna take to retain people, not necessarily women, but just retain the people we have, because how expensive it is to just try to find people. Marketing, like, why not just keep people in-house? So that is one thing that we have just started within the last several months. So I think that's going to help in the long run in the future. But the Tom Wood group, I mean, Tom Wood, his son, is now the president of the company, Jeff Wood. So it is a huge family. So one of the things that we usually say is, we are Tom Wood. Because we are, all of us are. So it's a good family environment. We do different charity events and things like that for the American Cancer Society together. So we're all together, even if we're at different stores. We all link up every once in a while to do other events. We have town hall meetings at least twice a year.
All right.
Yeah, so we all talk about what's going on in the group, what new things are going in, what's going out, and everybody from every store in the area meets that day, all of us. So
and that's not just good advice for the biggest groups or the smallest group. That's just good advice, right? Sit down and listen a little bit and understand where your people are at. Jessica, that was a phenomenal question. I think you should just run the show from here on out like that. That was way better than my question. But I'm curious to get your take on that, Jessica, because coming from the aftermarket, where we probably have a lot of smaller shops, right? They're probably not the multi-store. There obviously are multi-store aftermarket shops, independent shops, but that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what Katie just talked about is easy to scale up and down, right? You can all go work on a charity event together. You can get your team together and talk to them as a group. You can create small groups. There's a lot that can be done. I think we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think diversity is easy to see, easy to understand. Equity, got it, understood, easy to understand. Inclusion is a lot harder. And I think that's what Katie was really speaking to. She was talking about how they have created an inclusive environment. And whether that was their intention or not, I don't know. But they're having events, like they're all getting out and they're doing something together. They're creating opportunities for feedback to go 360 degrees or 180 degrees. I'm not sure what we're calling it now, but up and down the organization, right? And by allowing those groups to form. So I think sometimes we think if we're in a small business that we don't have the same tools, but these are easy tools. I think anybody on this call, even if you have a small team at a big company, you could apply a lot of what Katie talked about.
2 ears, one mouth, right? And I think that from a leadership perspective is such an important piece. Now, Jessica, what do we do with that information? When we get that information and they're talking as a team, I know at times it can put some weird pressure on a leadership group or anybody in leadership to have to maybe perform and really to that expectation that those employees are coming to you with and saying, hey, this is what we need. This is what we really want. How do you take action on that?
I think it's super simple. There's an old SNL skit and it's somebody and they're going to a therapist and they're looking for advice. You're smiling. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think
they're
I do.
They're going to go to a psychologist and they plan to have this whole hour-long session. And the guy goes, nope, it's only going to take 5 minutes. You're going to be in and out. I just have one thing to say. Just stop it. And I think it's the opposite for this, right? Just start it. Just try something. I was recently called a disruptor and I didn't ever think of myself like that.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, I like to think of it as a responsible disruptor, right? I don't want to come in and I don't want to break things, but I want to responsibly come in and find opportunities to improve things. So I think you asked how, just start, just pick one thing, just do one thing. Like I just wrote down town halls and I'm not the CEO or the president of a company, but I could do small town halls with our cross-functional groups twice a year. That seems really doable.
Right. And especially when you have objectives and Katie, I'll pick on something that you said there because I think it was really, really great, which was really just getting people together to get that feedback. And if you're looking at needing more technicians or more service advisors, more whatever it is, and you're not talking about it, it's really easy for that stuff to end up on the back burner and just not do anything, right? And you can become paralyzed because maybe you think employees are thinking a certain way, but unless you're actually talking to them, you don't know. Regardless of how intuitive you are, you don't know until you get that feedback. What have you seen come out of those conversations? Because I do think that's unique to what we're talking about with women in the industry as well, is just hearing the feedback or the ability to listen to what would make a woman's life easier. Have you been able to raise any of those subjects in those meetings?
I haven't specifically myself, but I do know that during one meeting we had talked about, asking open-ended questions to Jeff, which Trisha, our main marketing manager, she said, I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to do it. And at that town hall meeting, we got to ask Jeff or whoever out of the higher ups, we want to know this, we want to know that, without them having any kind of prompts and just asking open-ended questions. And I think that was great for the employees of the group to do, because they could ask whatever they wanted, and get an answer.
That's strong leadership in general, to be secure enough with yourself to hear that feedback, and some of it might not be that great to hear or not feel all that great to hear. But the more you can take that feedback and adapt yourself and adapt your leadership style to that, I think that is such a key point that so many in our industry miss. As simple as it sounds, it doesn't sound like rocket science, doesn't sound like anything that's too crazy, but if you're not good at it, that's gonna put you behind, right? We do have a question, and Jessica, I'll start with you on this one because I do think it might lead us into some more conversation about kind of what we've already talked about. But the question is, I'd love to hear more about attracting female talent. That's what we're seeing is the biggest challenge, getting female talent in the door in the first place. Any thoughts to that question? Or that is a very loaded question because I feel like there's so many different avenues you could go with that question.
Yeah, I think you have to start recruiting in a different way. You can't go to the same, you can't post the post in the same way. You can't put it in the newspaper or however you're sharing it. You can't do it the same way. You're going to have to be really intentional about where you're recruiting and who you're recruiting. And I think word of mouth is almost every position I've ever had is because somebody, reached out to me and somebody had mentioned my name to somebody. So I think that's one thing. I really applaud the work. AutoZone, my vice chair, Ellie Lawhead, and AutoZone, they locally in Memphis, they work with the Girl Scouts of America. I think that's a phenomenal idea, right? Education is, I think, one of the biggest pieces that we're missing, right? You and I talked about, I didn't know the automotive aftermarket was a thing, right? I knew car dealerships because I had bought a car before, but I didn't understand the entire complexities of the automotive industry and all of the opportunities there. So I think we have to start educating in middle schools and high schools and elementary schools in order to show people that there are great opportunities in an industry that's resilient.
How do you go about that? The visibility piece and showing off that you are inclusive and that you are, that you desire to have females in your workplace.
I think you start talking about it, and I think you reach out to the network of people that and you say, hey, we've got a few openings and we're really hoping to hire somebody different, whatever that different looks like, right? Typically we would post it in this particular automotive form, and that's where we get all of our applications from, and then we have the same 3 people that are going to interview them. Instead of that, why don't we talk to the people that are working at the company, right? Maybe at one of the town halls that Tom Wood has. Something like that, say, hey, we're trying to really hire some diverse people. Who do you know in your network that has never thought about a career in this industry that we could talk to, right? Who is the first person that comes to your mind that's totally different and has never thought about working in a dealership or working in a shop? Let's talk to them. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah, and for those WrenchWay clients that are out there, again, I certainly don't want to make this a plug to WrenchWay, but that's a big piece of that. We want you creating authentic content, and maybe it is somebody like Katie getting on and sharing her experience on video, and then being able to share that when you're out and talking to a class of students, or you're out in interviewing a lady that might be scared of coming into your front doors, right? How do you make it known that you are welcoming and that you have friendly faces in the building that are willing to help you out and hold your hand as you get off the ground? I think that the content piece and putting yourself out there as an employer and showing that you're doing it. A lot of you that are, I read through the list of names that are attendees here. There's a lot of you that are already doing amazing work with females in your businesses, yet nobody knows about it, right? That's
Yeah,
a
Jay,
problem.
I think if you look around and everybody who you work with is exactly like you, then we probably have a problem. So if we need to recruit someone else, maybe you start with customers, right? Maybe you look around at your customers and say, are the people that work here representative of the people that are coming into my shop or my bay or wherever I work? And if not, maybe I should start asking them, hey, do you know somebody? We're really trying to hire and we're trying to create a more diverse. I think customers are a great place to start.
Couldn't agree more. Katie, any thought to that in terms of how you provide visibility to that young female that's out there and aspiring to be the next Katie?
So, Jessica, you said Girl Scouts, and the immediate thing that came to my mind was we've actually hosted some Girl Scouts in our
Love it.
shop. And we hosted a troop, and we taught them how to take a tire off and put a spare on. Like, how cool is that? My boss took them into our tire room and showed them how to mount and balance a tire. And like, we just walked them around the shop and kind of showed them everything. It was like a badge that they were creating, like a car care badge, to learn how to like check their oil. And obviously we weren't teaching them how to change their oil, but you know, just to like the little things that they could check and that they could look at and they could do on their own. So I think, I mean, obviously it's a business, but if you are looking for women or a younger group of people to come through, why not offer that or reach out to someone local?
I love that, Katie. I want to come next time. I could use the badge. I'm super intimidated around anybody who is ASE certified or who knows anything about cars. I used pliers this weekend, but it was to fix a piece of jewelry.
It's a big win right there, though. That's a big, don't discount that, Jessica.
Yeah,
big win.
You did it.
No, it's a, I think a microcosm of what we stink at as an industry, right? Is showing off how great of places we are to work. And there's so many shops out there that have so many talented females in those shops. And I think a lot of it is just getting that visibility to the ones that have already done it, right? They're just knowing that there's others out there that can do it. I think is a big win. Now, we do have another question from Tyler, and this is an interesting one, and we might have to stew on this one because I'm not quite sure how to answer this one. What advice do you have for high school students, and how can high school students get involved? That, and Tyler, the one thing I would maybe follow up with that question is, are you a high school student? Are you trying to figure out how you get more visibility to it? Or are you trying to talk to, you know, how you get more high school students involved, at like female high school students involved, which I think is kind of relative to what we had talked about a lot here just now. But anything stick out to you about that question?
Yeah, apply for a scholarship. Right? The University of the Aftermarket Foundation gives away a ton of scholarships, and I think half of them go to women, if not more. So there are a ton of opportunities. If you're in high school and you want to get it, this industry should not be the best kept secret, right? So go apply for those scholarships. They are awarded to anyone who is interested in the automotive aftermarket, and it can be in any facet of the business. Are you interested in cybersecurity? Are you interested in marketing? Are you interested in becoming a technician? We also give away pallets of tools. So I think as a high school student, that would be my advice, right? So if you go apply for a scholarship, get some money, get involved in a community. We also at Women in Auto Care, one of our board members launched a mentoring program. So if you got a scholarship, you were asked and invited to be a part of a mentoring circle program. So all of the high school students could get together and talk about it, talk about what's going on, the challenges that they're having, and how they can face them together. So I think if you feel all we really want as humans is to feel like a part of a group, and how can we create those opportunities for people within our industry?
And that is one thing that I think our industry has done a phenomenal job of late with, right? In creating more groups around getting women tied to other women, and really being able to find those really successful people. There's a number of great groups that are out there now that are helping kind of push the word out, and really, you know, you mentioned, Jessica, that the scholarships. If you're a student out there listening to this, and you can go and at least press your educators about what scholarship opportunities are out there. What, you know, if you've got a young female that is interested in getting involved in the industry, there's so many people you can reach out to now. Even we at WrenchWay have resources where we can be able to help you get tied into the right organization that can help you. So I do think there's more opportunities than ever. I think that's going to continue to improve and increase. So that is great. Now, I want to talk, you know, we're talking about getting more women into the industry, and I want to talk about why they should think about doing it, right? What are the good things about this industry? Why would somebody be crazy enough to come into our industry as a young female? And Katie, I'll start with you. If you're talking to young Katie, what advice would you give young Katie, and really, what opportunities are out there for a young female?
There's a lot of opportunities. I mean, for me, when I was younger, maybe didn't take advantage of all the opportunities. Just 401k. Like, why didn't I start that when I was 19 years old? I don't know. There's so many different opportunities, ways to move up. I wish I would have maybe tried to get a little bit more involved in the beginning, but I'm really happy with where I'm at right now. So I don't know what else really. I wish I would have started with that 401k.
Oh,
That's such a good point.
Yes. The moment you can start with a 401k, you better start investing. And if your company matches, you better be putting it. If that's advice to everybody. If you're in here and you're not donating, putting money into your 401k, you better be doing it. You better do it today. Stop what you're doing.
Yeah.
I saw another question in the chat, and I wanted to touch on this because I think this kind of ties into what we're talking about right now. Vanessa says, what questions do you suggest a newly trained technician should ask during the interview process, and what should she be looking for, both in signs that this is a good place or red flags that maybe they should ignore the place to go work? That's a really good question, and maybe let's start with the red flags. Like, let's break this apart a little bit. When you look at red flags, what are some things that might tell you that that shop or that dealership is not overly inclusive of females?
I think you look around, and I think you're going to have a feeling immediately. And I think if you get there and you find out it's different, you can leave. There are a lot of other places that's a great time to be hired somewhere else. So don't stay somewhere if you're not feeling comfortable. Obviously, you need to stay as long as you need to support your family. But if you can, go find other opportunities. I think as far as questions to ask, that's really tough. But I always ask a little bit about the culture. I think anytime you go into an interview, you need to do some research on the company. So go on their website, look at who's on their leadership team, go to the shop, go to the dealership, look around, who are the customers, who are the people working there, how are they treating them? I think you will be able to trust your instinct, and you will be able to see it and understand what's going on.
Katie, anything to add?
I think a lot of what Jessica said. I mean, if you walk into a place and you're there for an interview and you don't get greeted, and you see a bunch of men, I mean, obviously that would be a red flag for me, especially nowadays. But I mean, really a good question to ask is, how are you going to be accommodating to me? Like, are you going to get me uniforms that fit me, that aren't going to be a men's, shirt and pants? I think that would be a great question if they're willing to go to their supplier, uniform supplier, and be like, hey, we got this nice lady starting and we need to get her a uniform that fits.
That's a big one.
Do that, I'd be all for it.
Yeah, Jay, we talked about tools, right? And I don't know that much about it, but I know that Judy Zimmerman told me that the tools that are created aren't really designed necessarily for a woman's hand or strength capabilities, and that there's a need for that. So maybe you ask some questions around that. Maybe you ask some questions around the culture, around the people, around team building. And I don't know, I think a red flag would be, who's on the calendar, right? Who's on the calendar behind their head? Are they dogs? Or is it something else?
I, as we're going through this, as we do in a lot of the roundtables, I'm just fascinated by the comments that come in and the suggestions and the best practices. we never have all the answers, but it's great to get people into the same room so we can talk about it. And I wanted to point to a couple of comments. Judy Walter had said, questions, can you accommodate a female tech? In examples would be uniforms, restrooms, shower rooms, or have you hired female techs in the past? And that's very related to technicians. I think that same thing relates to advisors, service managers. I think those were some really good, really good questions. And Emily DeWitt kind of had something similar to that. So I do think my advice there is maybe think about other experiences where you haven't felt welcomed and look for those when you go into interview, right? So if you have been in a store, maybe you were in a retail store that's non-automotive at some point and didn't feel like you were treated very well, you can see those. And I think that speaks to your point, Jessica, about the feeling, because in a lot of cases you've probably felt that before, right? You've felt something that doesn't feel right.
Yeah, absolutely. I was also thinking, if you're the interviewer, I heard really great advice around interviewing people, that after the interview, you should walk them to the car and you'll be fascinated by what they will reveal to you on the way out of the interview. So walking that person to the car. So my brother tried it. He's a fighter pilot and he was on the hiring and interviewing board. And so he was walking people to the car, and he had people admit to him that in a fighter pilot on an army base that they had drinking alcohol before the interview, that crazy things had happened, but they will admit a lot to you and you'll find out a lot about them, about who the person is on that tiny little walk back to their car.
Interesting. And you had some parallels there too, Jessica, of your brother being a fighter pilot and how they tried to make it more inclusive, or maybe some of the struggles that they had. And I think that's one key thing to keep in mind, is that this isn't just exclusive to our industry, right? Like the other industries battle this as well.
Jay, I was in jewelry, home decor, fashion before I came into this industry. And I had way worse experiences being a woman in that industry. And that was very women dominated.
That's crazy.
So, yeah.
This is no, I think it's really good for conversation's sake to talk about this, but let's talk about what we do to take that, small percentage of technicians, or like service advisors. I feel like that percentage is obviously quite a bit higher in terms of how many female service advisors we have out there. But I want to talk about the technician side for a minute. And when I say that, I want to talk about how we increase that percentage of our industry that is female and actually going out and working on vehicles or equipment or trucks, whatever it might be. Jessica, you had mentioned one thing that might, if there's a tool manufacturer out there listening, that might be a huge opportunity, is being able to make some tools that make the life of a female in a shop easier. Are there other opportunities? And Katie, I'll start with you. You work with technicians every single day. Do you see any opportunity to make that maybe a little bit easier on that female technician that's out in the shop?
Yeah, I mean, our shop right now was, I don't know when it was built, but over 15, 20 years ago, maybe. There's only one bathroom or locker room in the shop. So obviously, we did have 1, 2 females out in the shop before, since I've been here. And so they've had to go into the lounge, to the guest waiting room and go to the women's restroom in there. One was pretty daring though. I went into the men's locker room a few times, but not all the time, obviously. But yeah, I mean, something like that, just a restroom or a changing place, a changing area for females. We do have lockers for really everybody in the shop, but that would be one main thing, the bathrooms.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, Katie. Yeah, bathrooms, that's crucial. Yeah, you've got
That's a big one.
Private place. Yeah.
Jessica, I want to maybe swing the topic here just a little bit. One of the things we talked about is the psychology of guy and girl, right? And really, when we talked about selling to a female and how often that conversation gets directed to the man, and I do think there's some level or some sense of just the wiring in our brains that makes it weird. And the way that I equated it was, when you're little boys and little girls, and maybe the little boy has a crush on the little girl, like it very rarely is that boy looking at the girl in the face, right? I don't know if there's anything there, but it feels like there's a little bit of a, I don't even want to say butterflies in the stomach, but it's maybe the way we're wired from a young age. Do you see kind of where I'm going there, or is there any truth to that?
Sure. And so I think about it because I sit in a lot of conference rooms or boardrooms. And when you sit in a conference room, if I'm sitting there with Jay and Katie and Sarah, and Katie asks me a question, often the person will just look at Katie. And I think it's really important that you talk to everybody in the room. So if a man and a wife are coming together to a shop, even if the man is just asking a question, making sure that you make eye contact with everybody who is in that room. Everyone who is in the conversation gets the full attention of you and what you're trying to say in the message. And I don't think it's just men and women. It's also, sometimes you might just respond to the person who's the vice president or the person who's the CEO or the person who's the manager and forget about everybody else in the room. So really being intentional about who you're looking at and who you're talking to and including everybody in the room. That's what inclusivity is.
One of the things that I've struggled with, or maybe think that I could make a situation awkward with, is really trying to figure out. I've been told by female technicians in the past, they're like, I just want to be known as a technician, like not male or female or whatever. I just want to go do my job, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of people, but at the same time, we're trying to do these things that are over and above for a female. And at times it feels like it's really hard not to kind of make them feel like they're different, right? And that's the hardest part, I think, for a lot of management and leadership is you don't want to separate them. You don't want them to be kind of shown as on their own, but at the same time, you want to be very supportive of them and helpful to them. And I think it's a fine line to balance, right? And I think that's why we all get so nervous about this.
Yeah, I saw a great graphic the other day, and it was the difference between equality and equity. And equality, it had, people of 3 different sizes all riding the same bike because that's equal. And then it had equality. And equality, it was the tiny person. So the child was riding a child-sized bike, and the larger people were riding bikes that were their own size. So I think there are definitely opportunities, like you should have a women's bathroom, or you should have a bathroom or a separate place for people to go. You should have those uniforms, right? So there are places for that, and there are places that aren't for that. And Jay, I think sometimes we're all going to screw up. And if we do screw up, it's okay to say, ooh, crap, I don't really like the way that landed. Right? I don't really like the way that came out. I'm really sorry about that. Thank you for working with me. I appreciate that. And, please help me be better, because that's what we're all trying to do, is be a little bit better. And that's what the goal of your podcast and of WrenchWay really is.
Yeah, absolutely. Katie, I mean, same thing to you. Do you see maybe the challenges from a leadership standpoint to where you're trying to walk that fine line for, not making somebody feel like they're out on an island versus there are some different needs that are associated?
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot more room now. People do kind of accommodate. I mean, it's hard for me to say from like a manager or like leadership perspective, but I mean, we've got even people, I keep going back to our shop because I mean
Yeah.
we do so many different things, but we have some that have like special needs that we bring into the shop. We had a technician that was deaf. I mean, we've overcome all of those things. So having a woman or putting a woman in a technician spot, I don't think we would have a problem doing that or accommodating or figuring it out, rather. Just need the opportunity.
That's the big key point, is that we have the opportunities out there as an industry, right? We need more talent in our industry, and our pool is kind of run dry in terms of the traditional aspects or the traditional ways of going about finding those people. And a lot of it is there's just not enough people to fill the jobs that we have open, right? So here's this opportunity we've got in front of us to become more appealing to more, the majority, right? There's what I think 51, 52% of the population are female in the United States, yet such a low percentage are in our industry. uh, I think we're starting to understand that as an industry we still have a very long way to go, and there's still a lot of things that we can learn and we can really start to figure out, right? And I think that is one of the challenges we have. I see that Hannah had mentioned here, you mentioned targeting females in ads. How do you find active female technicians or advisors or other positions? Are there particular ways that you are attracting that current talent outside of word of mouth? I think the biggest thing to understand there is there probably aren't a lot in our industry yet, right? There's still a huge opportunity to get out there, but that comes at a younger age. That comes talking to females at a younger age and letting them know that there are opportunities out there. I think most shops would take a female technician or a female advisor tomorrow, right? They would, if they're talented and they're good, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what their background is. If they're a good person and they work hard and they're talented, they're going to have work. And I think that's been one of the cool parts. I think what I've seen in the industry of late anyway is that there has been more acceptance. There has been more willingness to want to take on female workers. And I think some of that comes from us being pushed in a corner and having to do it. But then I also think once you do that, you see the talent level and how incredibly talented a lot of these ladies are. I've had a number of female technicians work for me that just blew my mind with how talented they were. Same with advisors, same with service managers, right? It to me is so much more dependent on the individual and their values and how they carry themselves than whether they're male or female. That it to me is just it's such a no brainer, and part of the human society that we just haven't tapped into nearly enough. So I'll get off my stoop there, but that's that's one of the things where, as we look at our industry and the severe shortage of talent we have right now, there is a pool out there that we just have not tapped into or done a good enough job tapping into. But I feel like we're heading in the right direction because of people like the two of you, right? We're moving in the right direction. Jessica, you look like you have something to add.
I was just going to say, Warren Buffett, the founder of Berkshire Hathaway, said that he's only gotten to where he is because he only had to compete against half of the population. So I think that's an important message to think about. And I think what you said is really valuable. Things are getting better. We should all be so grateful to the leaders who have come before us, who have paved the way for all of us.
And tell those stories of those that did, right? That is such an important take home to all of you. And those WrenchWay shops that we have out there, we'll probably get after you a little bit to create some content around that, because I do think that's really important. Julia has a fantastic question. Katie, I'm going to start with you with this question. How does a woman in the industry get over the intimidation of the industry and or working with men in general? Coming from a hairstylist of 16 years, I think that is a fantastic question.
Yeah. I mean, for me specifically, I grew up with mostly all boys. So it's always come very easy or like natural to me. But I think it's more so in my personality that I want to show them up. I want to show them what I got. And just being confident, really, being confident in yourself, even if you're wrong, just being confident. And once everybody sees that, I think it's much easier to do whatever you want to do.
I, yeah, that's beautiful. I think the truth is that you don't, right? You're not always going to, I do not always walk into a room and feel confident. I had a great conversation with a couple of guys last night who were sharing how often that they feel imposter syndrome. And these are two people that I see on stage all the time, that we see on stage in our industry all the time. And so the truth is that you will not always be confident. So try a couple of things. Number one, you should always hydrate. Drinking water helps no matter what you're doing with your life. But try to just breathe, right? Just take a breath, take a beat, take a moment and breathe. And then the other thing that I like to say is trying maybe a gratitude exercise. So trying to reshape the feeling that you're having into being grateful.
That is great advice from both of you, and I think a fantastic way to end our roundtable here today. I thank the both of you for everything you're doing. You're out there being trailblazers yourselves, and kind of showing the way that females can be very, very successful in this line of work. And just greatly appreciate everything you guys are doing out there.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks to everybody that listened. Again, this was recorded, so you'll be able to get this. Well, I think we'll email it out to all registrants. So thanks to everybody for taking the time out of your busy days to listen. Hopefully you took something away from this that you can take into your shops, implement, and hopefully promote yourself to over half the population. So thank you to everybody. Look forward to seeing you next month.
Thanks, Jay.
Bye.